Every life unfolds in seasons. Seasons that train you, seasons that transform you, and seasons that transition you into purpose. In Train, Transform, Transition, Geralda Larkins shares a proven, faith-centered framework to help you move forward with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Now expanded with Part 4, Triumph. Because victory isn't something we manufacture, it's what becomes possible when faith leads the journey. Through every challenge, every transition, every assignment, your next chapter is waiting. Step forward. Step into triumph. For more information, visit GeraldaLarkins.com.
Good evening and welcome to Triumph. I'm Geralda Larkins. In the second edition of my book, Train, Transform, Transition, I established that triumph isn't something we manufacture. Triumph is something that God leads us into. And the reality is, being led into triumph often requires crossing over. And crossing over has a cost. We love to celebrate the breakthrough. We love to celebrate the new door, the testimony, the next chapter. We celebrate the healing, the promotion, the launch, the public victory. But very few people talk honestly about what it costs to leave a place that no longer honors who God is calling you to become. And I never wanted a position to silence me. I never wanted influence to cost my integrity. So I chose to leave federal service. And that crossing over cost me comfort. It cost me familiarity, stability, and some relationships. The crossing over costs, but it preserved my soul. And in the economy of God's kingdom, that's never a bad trade. Listen, the crossing over may cost the version of you that learned how to survive in that old environment. But the longer you stay in an environment that normalizes dysfunction, the greater the risk that you'll begin to normalize dysfunction within yourself. Look at Exodus chapter 14. We see the Israelites standing at the Red Sea. Behind them is Pharaoh's army. In front of them is nothing but water. They're trapped between bondage and impossibility. And God tells Moses, "Tell my people to move on." Move on. Not back to Egypt. Not back to familiar bondage, not back to what abused them simply because it was predictable or familiar. Move on. That word is powerful because many leaders don't stay in unhealthy places because they're called to stay. They stay there because fear makes familiar feel safer than faith. But familiar does not always mean safe. Some environments are familiar because you've adapted to dysfunction. You've learned how to survive there. You've learned how to manage the tension, how to read the room, how to anticipate criticism, and how to protect yourself emotionally. But survival is not the same as alignment. That's where the earlier parts of the book matter. In Train, God gives us revelation, and revelation helps us to see clearly. In Transform, God renews our minds so we can stop calling dysfunction normal. In Transition, God gives us the courage to move. And now, to walk in triumph, you're going to have to cross over in alignment with who God called you to be and what He's assigned you to do. Crossing over is not abandonment. Crossing over is alignment. I want to name 3 things I teach in the book about crossing over. First is the discipline of strong boundaries. Boundaries are not rejection. Boundaries are protection. Healthy leaders don't allow unlimited access to their peace or their energy. Some people are going to resent your boundaries, and most times the reason they resent them is because they've benefited from your lack of them. But Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." That's not a personality preference. That's a leadership instruction. A boundary says, I can serve without surrendering my soul. I can forgive without giving dysfunction continued access. I can honor my assignment without dishonoring myself. Guarding your heart is not weakness, it's wisdom. Second is the power of silence. One of the hardest skills in leadership is learning when to not respond. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding needs your energy. There were moments in my transition when silence protected me far more than any argument could have. Matthew 27:12, when Jesus was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. So if the Savior of the world could stand in a dignified silence before his accusers, I could learn to stop explaining myself to people who have already made it up in their minds to misunderstand me. Silence is not weakness. Silence is wisdom under control. The third thing is staying calm under pressure. Pressure reveals character. When environments become hostile, people begin to study your reactions. They watch your composure. They observe whether pressure changes your integrity. And a calm leader changes the emotional temperature of a room. Not because they're unaffected, but because their emotions are not the ones making the decisions. Integrity can be lonely. When you become the person willing to raise a concern, to challenge inappropriate behavior, to refuse an unethical request, courage tends to isolate you before it inspires anyone. I experienced this personally. There were seasons during my transition when I was emotionally exhausted from simply carrying the weight of discernment. Every conversation required caution. Every decision carried implications that I had to weigh carefully. And sometimes, while everyone else saw authority, I saw exhaustion. Elijah knew this. We see in 1 Kings chapter 19, after his greatest victory, calling fire down from Mount Carmel. He collapses under a tree and tells God he had enough. One of the most powerful leaders in all scripture completely depleted, because sustained integrity in a hostile environment is genuinely costly. And God's response to Elijah is tender and instructive. He didn't rebuke him, he fed him. He let him rest. He sent him back out with a new assignment. God doesn't discard leaders who are depleted from doing the right thing, he restores them. Jesus modeled this too. He withdrew to pray. David wept openly before God, and Paul wrote honestly about his hardships. We read in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8, he was hard pressed on every side, yet not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair. Pressure doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes pressure is evidence that God is strengthening your endurance. So how do you know when it's time to cross over? I give you 6 honest questions worth sitting with in chapter 17. Am I staying because God called me to stay, or because fear is keeping me stuck? Is this environment developing me or diminishing me? What is this season teaching me about courage? What behaviors am I normalizing that God is asking me to confront? What boundaries do I need to establish to protect my peace? And this one, am I protecting my title more than my integrity? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary. And the leaders who avoid them are often trapped in unhealthy cycles far longer than God intended. Crossing over requires discernment. And we see in Matthew chapter 7, verse 16, Jesus says, "You will know them by their fruits." Patterns reveal culture. Patterns reveal leadership. Patterns reveal whether an environment is healthy for your purpose, and if that environment consistently normalizes confusion, fear, secrecy, retaliation, emotional instability, or compromise, you must pay attention. One incident may be a mistake, but a pattern reveals culture. And when a pattern begins to threaten your integrity, your peace, your health, or your obedience to God, you're going to have to ask some hard questions. Abraham left without knowing the destination. The Israelites moved on before they saw the water part. And Peter stepped out before the surface felt firm. Faith moves first, revelation follows, and obedience is never wasted. And the God who is asking you to go, who is telling you to move on, or is inviting you to step out, he is the same God who promises to always lead you to triumph. Connect with me online at GeraldaLarkins.com. everyone. And I'm so excited to introduce the guest that we have on tonight. This is the incomparable Hyacinth Henderson. She is a licensed financial professional, a belief shifting mentor, and you'll see that for yourself in a minute. A visionary voice in the wealth empowerment space. As co CEO of the Henderson Financial Group, she blends strategy with soul to help high achieving women, especially entrepreneurs and professionals of minority groups, reclaim their financial power and build legacies that last. With over 2 decades of experience, Hyacinth goes beyond budgets and balance sheets. She guides audiences to confront generational narratives, shift wealth mindsets, and create financial ecosystems rooted in intention and purpose. Welcome, Hyacinth Henderson, to the show.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It is
Yes.
absolutely a pleasure to be here. I am so glad that God ordained this connection in this time right now, in this space, in this season that we are in life. Thank you for the call. I'm so happy to answer the call, and I am looking forward to sharing what God has placed on our hearts with not only our immediate audience and those of who we have in mind, but those who we're not even thinking about, but God has this message for, and those that you haven't met yet, but who are waiting for your message and your book and the work that you're doing and what we're going to share together, because I'm a firm believer that we go in it thinking one level and God has expanded it 2, 3, 100 times, and we don't even fathom and imagine. The biggest part is being obedient. So thank you for being your obedience. I appreciate you.
Oh, ditto. And the center around this conversation is the chapter I wrote in the second edition of my book called The Cost of Crossing Over.
Mm-hmm.
It's a topic around obedience, alignment, and transition and how that comes at a cost. And for many people, one of the greatest costs is the fear around the financial impact of leaving an unhealthy environment. And it can go from leaving a career environment or leaving a relationship environment, but that fear can really grip people and keep folks stuck. But it's also some internal work that folks need to do around, losing comfort and familiarity, that stability, and even relationships. It's about like shedding old versions of identity and in order to preserve your soul and really walk in alignment with your purpose. I could not think of anyone else that can speak into this topic like you. That's been the heart of your life's work. And so, Hyacinth, for those that are just getting to know you, tell us about your work, the heart behind your message around wealth, identity, freedom, and sustainable success.
Mhm, mhm. So I help high achieving women shift their beliefs and their mindsets and their identities so that they can step into what God has called them to do and who God has called them to be. So in the practical world, I use financial planning as a tool in my tool belt, but at the surface, it is identity work. And I've come into this work because for those of you who may not know, I had my daughter 23 days after my 19th birthday. So the version of Hyacinth that gave birth to a baby is a different version of the Hyacinth that you're seeing here. And in order to get to this version of this Hyacinth, I had to step into the new identities that I knew that I was destined for and that God was calling me to. And it's not always easy to do that. But as I was going along my journey, and then in the practical world, working at the Henderson Financial Group, so I had my daughter in 2000, and I started working at the Henderson Financial Group in 2002. So I was placed in this position to where I was learning money and seeing how people related with money, and then observing myself and battling with, I'm just, a teen mom, a little girl, we still had wall
Yeah,
ACs.
yeah, yeah.
It was really, God put me in position at such a time so that I lived the experience.
Yes.
And it got to a point in my journey that as I was living the experience and people kept coming to the Henderson Financial Group, and we all grown here, we know that 2 + 2 = 4. And if you spend more than you earn, there's going to be a shortage. But for some reason, that wasn't enough. People
Mhm.
weren't getting it.
Yeah.
And Then we got into the space where women, people, men were earning more money than they had ever earned before, but they still were holding on to an identity
Mm,
that God had called them from. So they
wow.
still had that poverty mindset, that scarcity mindset, how we got here.
Yeah.
And I experienced it. It's not something that you don't go to school for this. It's called life school and God's anointing.
Wow. Amen. And you share in when you hear you talk about many of those beliefs that you once had were
Mhm,
not actually yours. They
mhm.
were inherited beliefs, and it shaped how you made decisions about money, about work, safety, success. Can you speak on that? You talked about how you had to live it. So kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love this question because it's one that I am it's a topic that I'm very passionate about, and that is getting people to see that you were born into a family, a community who loved you and did the
Mm,
best that they could with what they knew.
mhm,
But if you followed, whether that's family, community, culture, if you
yeah.
followed their rules, you would be rewarded. And if you did not, then you would be punished. And
Mm,
so we started inheriting beliefs like, I can't afford that, or I have to wait until payday, or investing is for another group of people. I'm not giving them people
mm.
my money, right? Or I'm not putting my money in the bank. I got to put it under the mattress or in the coffee can way in the back of the cabinet, right? So we started inheriting these beliefs and these behaviors from the people who loved us so much that they gave us what they knew. But here's the thing. If you get into your BIBLE, basic instructions before leaving Earth, there are so many scriptures and beautiful love stories that remind you that you were placed here to be abundant,
Come on.
prosperous, and wealthy, and to have dominion,
Come
majesty,
through.
and power. So when we think about that and we think about why we aren't taking certain measures and certain movements to move forward, it is only because of the beliefs and the conditioning
Mm,
that oftentimes we haven't taken a step back to examine and say, I know this worked for you. And I know you have my best interests at heart. And no, I'm not going to say you hating. But however, there was a promise that was made for me
come
and to me.
through.
And I have to explore how I can get to that promise. And a very real example is I'm a daddy's girl. Love my daddy to life. Love him. I have a very close relationship with my father. I distinctly remember the moment in my late 30s, probably early 40s, when I had to. So, mind you, I have been doing this work and shifting beliefs and breaking through barriers and like reprogramming my mindset for 15, 20 years at this point. But I distinctly remember this moment. One of my dad's favorite things to say or used to say to me is, come on, just you just got to trust me. I'm telling you, trust me. I'm telling you. And I love him and I know he loves me. And I like to say I'm the favorite of five. We don't say that too loud. So I know that it was coming from a good place.
Yes. Yes.
However, Daddy, as much as I want to trust you, and you telling me there's so much more beyond his experience, and I
Yeah.
had to expand beyond that.
Mm.
And so when we talk about
Wow.
beliefs, I'm sharing that story because I don't want anyone listening to think,
Mm.
oh, Hyacinth is just saying that and it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy.
No, it's an evolution.
It's an
Yeah.
evolution.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. That in the book, I call this part the crossing over. It's that
Hmm.
reality that obedience, alignment, and transition is going to require us to leave the comfort, the
Hmm.
familiarity,
Hmm.
the old versions of
Hmm.
ourselves. At this phase or any other
Hmm.
milestone moment you can think of, what does crossing over mean to you from your identity or from a wealth perspective?
Yeah, it means shedding. It means intentionally choosing. When I hear crossing over,
Yeah.
I hear choose.
Mm.
So crossing over is a choice.
Yeah.
Crossing over is a choice. And here's what you're choosing. You're choosing to step into a new identity.
Come through.
You're choosing to step and saying, I'm choosing to step in this new identity. I'm scared. I don't have all the details. It is foreign to me, but I'm choosing to step into this new identity because God, I know that if you've called me to cross over, you have already created the path. You have already conditioned the environment. You have already put the people, the places, the things. I just need to move from where I am. And if I don't move from where I am, then I'm going to stay stuck. I'm going to risk losing or delaying all that you have for me. So crossing over is really an identity choice. And you're saying, hold on, let's talk about wealth. Because in this time space reality that we're living in now, so
Mm.
many people are being nudged to cross over. And they're, let me say it to you this way, people are being laid off. They're
Hmm.
being fired. Things
Yeah.
are changing in the world, in the workspace.
Yes.
And if we're not careful, we'll be so short sighted to think that the resource, our boss,
Come
the
on.
president, the
Come
entity
on.
is causing the movement and
Yes.
not realizing that the source is
Mm.
what's causing the movement. It's just coming through the resource, which may be your boss, which
Come
may be the
on.
president of the company. So you have to say, hold on, if I'm being called to move from here, whether it be laid off, terminated, fired, whatever the case may be, whatever fancy human word we want to use, we got to get into our Bible to
Yeah.
understand and be reminded that, oh, I'm being called to cross over. And I'm
Yes.
going to choose to step into that. And from a monetary standpoint, I'm going to tell you what I know and
Mm.
what I tell all of my clients. This world that we live in, nature is a beautiful reminder that things grow and bloom. We go
Yeah.
forward. So
Yeah.
if you're being called to cross over, you ain't going back. You ain't,
No.
you ain't going back. So God's not saying, I'm going to remove this, I'm going to remove you from this situation and I'm going to place you over here in a situation that's less. That's just why would that be? Now, on the crossing over and choosing a new identity, a lot of times we identify with positions, we identify with titles. So when it
Mm.
comes time to cross over, we holding on to a title in a position that God has said, my child, you have outgrown. I didn't mean for you to be there for 30, 40, 50 years for your eternity. I meant for you to be there for a season, but I have so much available for you that I am calling you to cross over and you get to choose a new identity. You may not know everything, you don't have it all figured out. That's where your faith comes in, right?
Come on.
It's very interesting because we get tied to these salaries, these bonuses. And I'm like, hold on. That's the resource. Are you tied to the resource or are
Yes.
you connected to the divine source? Which one is it?
Yeah.
Which one? Which
This is a word for this time, and a lot of people stay connected to
one?
unhealthy environments,
Mhm.
old identities. They stay in these survival patterns,
Mhm.
limiting systems because
Mhm.
they're just afraid. Can you speak on that, just the impact of like fear?
Fear is a very powerful emotion. It's a
Mm,
very powerful emotional experience. But, and
mm,
I'm very well aware that but cancels out everything I said before. So I'm going to say it again. Fear is a very powerful emotional experience that we
come
go
on.
through. Oh my God. But it is not more powerful than love.
Yes.
So, when you are in the moment of having your human experience and you going through the emotions and I'm scared and woe is me and I don't know how we gonna make it go through it. I'm gonna let you go through cry, snot, do all the things.
Yes.
When you finish
Mm,
and when you come up for air, we're going to shift to God's love. And we're
yes.
going to shift to God's promise. And we're going to understand that fear causes us to retreat and to shrink. Love causes us to grow and glow and expand. So
Yeah.
when you're faced with a decision such as crossing over and what am I going to do here? And you're going to be faced with so many paths to go down. You're standing at the crossroad of choices and paths and things like that. When you choose based out of fear, you're going to feel constricted. You are not going to feel open. You're not going to feel the power and the energy and the essence of love. You know, sometimes you just get that feeling where
Yeah.
you just like, I can't explain it with my human words. I
Hmm.
can't make it make sense based on what the world says, but I just know, like I just got a feeling
Yeah.
that everything is going to be all right. Now, but here's the thing. I just said this to somebody else, somebody yesterday. I said, let me tell you something. I don't do them types of things. I don't do the drugs and the this and all that. I don't, it's a lot of things I don't do. And I use that as a reminder, like, God,
Yeah.
I'm not out here doing this. I'm not out here doing, hey,
Hey,
what what's
like what we
happening?
doing? What we doing?
What we doing? What's going on? So
Yeah.
in that, I bring that because the pureness of heart. And
Yes.
what can happen is sometimes if we're not careful, we can allow fear to put us in the position where we start trying to play God.
Come on.
Now, what do I mean by that? Now you doing a little conniving, a little ism and schism, you rigging up this, you trying to do
Mm.
da. Okay, what am I saying? You got to hold on to your soul with both hands and be pure in
Yeah.
heart. Here's the thing. God rarely changes your circumstances before he shifts your identity.
Mm.
So when I mentioned Jacob and when I mentioned Abram becoming Abraham, what happened in those beautiful, beautiful Bible stories is God was shifting their identity so that he could change their circumstances.
Yeah.
And I want you to hold on to that as you're navigating life, whether even if it deals with money. I want you to hold on to that. Like, hold on. What's happening in my life? Where am I changing? Because we must be transformed by the renewing of our minds, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
because when we renew our minds, then we do what? Change our habits. And when we
Yes.
change our habits, we change our daily actions. And it's only by our daily actions that come after our changing our habits, that come after renewing our minds, that we then get a different result.
How do you know though when it's uh fear versus wanting to plan and be strategic with your money, wanting to do make the right decision? I know you talked about that feeling you get. For me, I'm with you and I'm at a crossroads. I'm praying, I'm in my word,
Mhm.
doing the things, of the disciplines of our faith and getting a sense of peace and getting wise counsel to make sure that once I make a decision, I'm going forward. I acknowledge God and I'm moving forward, right? But is that the process of getting there? What's the difference between being in fear and versus being strategic? And what does that look like for a person in transition?
Okay, and you mentioned the financial aspect, so I want to weave this into the
Yeah.
conversation a little bit, right? So, as it relates to money, because you're like Hyacinth and Geralda, I hear you and I
Yeah.
understand, but these bills and this
Okay.
money and what am I gonna do? And I'm scared. Okay, what are you scared of, right? So here's the thing: a lot of times, I like to remind my clients that you have the basic needs: food, clothing,
Yeah.
shelter, and water. So if you are in a position where you are crossing over and you're in that back seat and stuff is a little bit rocking, are we holding on to our designer lifestyle? I love a good designer bag and shoe. I
Yeah.
love it. However, if it comes to the point where I need to sell them or get or
Mm.
downsize my house, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, a lot of times when things are shifting, we are holding on to the thing so
Hmm.
much, the
Hmm.
things, the size of the things, the how it looks. We don't want to stop taking the trips. We don't want
Hmm.
to change our spending habits. We don't want to shift the way that we steward our money
Yeah.
while we still have some. And so what happens is we end up, quote unquote, going down with the ship. So
Mm.
one of the things that when clients come to me and they're in a period of transition, I'm like, get rid of it. Oh no, but I can't. Why? Why can't you?
Yeah.
Get rid of it. You have X available. Maybe you took, you know, whatever the situation is, but here's what you have.
Yeah.
And if this is what you have, what are you going to do to float? until you get to that point that you can climb. Because we
Mm.
know you're not going to be floating forever. God not going to have you doggy paddling forever. It's just
Yeah.
this is not the way he works, right? It's not his promise. So while you're doggy paddling, are you doggy paddling and holding on to lots of material things? What I like to say is you got to get lean.
Mm.
Get lean. And
Hmm.
here, and I'm going to tell you, as a financial professional for almost 25 years, so many of your friends and family, they want to get lean too. They
Yeah.
they want to get lean. So what does that look like? Here it is in practical terms. You have to know your numbers. That's the top thing I tell anybody. It doesn't matter if you're making $10,000 or $10 million. You have got to know your numbers so that when you are called to a season of crossing over and a season of change, you aren't Monday morning quarterbacking. You aren't doing it. You already know what your numbers are. You know what you can cut. You know what you need to make expenses hit. You know what you can take a sacrifice on. But a lot of times when money is flowing in, we are not good stewards over our finances.
Mm.
We are not good stewards over the gifts that God has given us. And when
Yeah.
we talk about being a good steward over the gift that God has given you, sometimes when the resource comes in to deliver that paper and saying, I'm laying you off, that is because source has had enough of you not being a good steward over your gifts. Look at her sitting at them people job playing, and I put all this in her, and she's supposed to be more than this desk. More, she complaining about the job every day she go there. She don't like the co-workers, she don't like the commute, she don't like nothing. She complaining, and I put these gifts inside of her, and
Mm.
she's not being the best steward she can be of the gifts. So let me take her out of her misery. Except they're getting to get crazy over here in the White House and everywhere else. Let me remove my child.
My
So
God.
there, are you a good steward over your physical money and your gifts? And here's a little secret I want to let you in on. Your physical money is a reflection of how much of your gift you share and what you do when you earn the money. Do you take your talent and goes and buries it, aka saying, I'm not investing,
Mm.
I'm putting it under the mattress? Are you the person who takes your talent, money that they're giving you, and you spend it all?
Yeah.
Or are you the person who takes the money that people have exchanged, given to you in exchange for the gifts that God has put inside of you, and says, I am going to multiply it, I'm
Yeah.
going to give back,
Mm.
I'm going to be a good steward over this? And when you do that, child, a resource can
Yep.
dry up and say it. You like, I'm a good steward over my talents. They multiplying. I got investments over here. I got real estate over there. But we
Yeah.
we we got to get down to the nitty gritty, and that's what we started with:
Mm.
identity. Who are you? Do you know who you are?
Mm.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And it's that inner work that you're growing. You're growing in what you know about yourself, what you learn about God, and what you learn about your career or your sphere of influence. So as you continue to grow and learn and like you said, transform by the renewing of your mind, you change your habits, you change your actions, etc. You're gonna grow and move into newer, versions of yourself. So that inner work that has to happen before the crossover into freedom, into good stewardship, into wealth building. What does that inner work look like for you? Like, what did you have to do in order to become?
So my inner work looks like a heavy self-reflection.
Yes.
Lots of time in my Bible,
Mm.
reading, journaling,
Wow.
taking accountability
Wow.
and shifting my mindset, because there was a time when I would say, why is this happening to me? XYZ did this, they did that. And if that's the case, I could kind of die on that hill, right?
Yeah.
But here's the way that I see it. When I am beating the drum of what went wrong and what people have done to me, my back is turned to all the opportunities and all the blessings that God has for me. So I had to shift and move from that space and consistently remind myself that I can stay over here or where they did this, this happened, this, or I can say, okay, let me pull back, let me self reflect and ask, okay, remember that source resource thing. You were just a vessel. You were just a vessel to teach God's child an experience or a lesson. All right, I got it. I've self reflected. Let me look over here.
Come
Let me look
on.
here and see, right? So lots of spending time with self, lots of getting
Mhm.
quiet. Here's the thing that I want to share with everyone under the sound of my voice. You have got to be very particular about what you put in your mind. You have got to protect it
Mhm.
because if you don't guard your mind,
Mm-mm-mm.
as you are doing your inner work, which is an everyday, every week thing, you will be pulled into what the world is doing. And
Yes.
you will find yourself not only being in the world, but of the world. And we know scripture tells us to
Yeah.
be in the world, but not of the world.
Mm.
So when you're doing your inner work, it's going to be very hard for you to take accountability and self-reflect and shift your perspective and say, okay, I know that this happened, but I'm not going to hold a grudge for 50 years. I'm not going to go blow up their house. It's going to be very hard for you not to do that if as soon as you turn on the TV, the algorithm is showing you people who are holding grudges. It's
Yes.
hard for you not to do that if as soon as you open your social media, the algorithm is showing you people who are fighting and cussing and like you thinking going back to beliefs and conditioning, this is the way you're supposed to behave. And now
Mm.
you're like, why am I not advancing? I'm reading my Bible. I know God's promise for me, but what's happened? Because you are in an environment and allowing that stuff to be put into your mind via TV, social media, the communities you go in.
Mm.
So now you're conflicted. Get rid of it.
Yes.
Get rid of it. That's a part of the inner work. Get rid of it.
My God. Hyacinth, what final encouragement would you give to a person who knows God is calling them to a new season, but is afraid of what obedience may cost?
Oh, so as we're thinking about the cost of obedience, oh, if I'm obedient, I'm going to be leaving this behind or this person and all this looks good, this comfortability. I want you to think about the cost of disobedience.
Mm.
We've often focused on what we can see, and I want to remind you what you can see with your human eyes is so small in comparison to what God has called you to do, what God has called you to have, and who God has called you to be. So when you're trying to use your human logic and your human eyes to make the decision on if I am going to be obedient or disobedient, you have a faulty scale. So you're weighing the cost, but the scale is not working. You got
Mm.
a faulty scale. You don't have a scale that's actually calibrated and set for you and all that is promised for you. So
Wow.
you understand.
I never heard of it that I never heard it say your scale isn't calibrated for what heaven has in store for you. I've never heard you just messed me up.
Now, how do you navigate? Again, we're having a human experience. How do you navigate those emotions and those feelings that come up? Because they're coming up so that you can address them. You're being triggered so that you can address them. Get in that Bible. Get on the floor on your knees. Don't be too good for it. And say, hold on. We talked about I surrender.
Yeah.
You know I gotta feed these children. You know, I gotta I'm scared, but I'm trying to weigh the cost. But I know that my scale is faulty. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, not believe, because belief still has doubt in it. So when we talk about belief and doubt, I'm giving you that picture because I want you to ask yourself, when are you believing and when are you knowing? So I know that me trying to weigh the cost of being obedient, my scale is faulty. And I know that the cost of disobedience is far greater than the cost of being obedient could ever be. It's a knowing. You hear the conviction? You hear
Yes.
it's not maybe so good. It's not. It is a strong knowing, and I implore everyone under the sound of my
Please.
voice get into that inner work so that you can have this knowing, so that no resource, no man, no woman can tell you who you are, can tell you what's for you. You can have the conviction of the knowing that you are called for greater, you are called for abundance, you are called for prosperity, you are called for dominion, majesty, and power. You are called for things beyond what your mind can conceive. and your eyes can see. But you got to get into that knowing. And then when you get into that knowing, you got to do the work, right?
Yes.
You got to
Yes.
do the work. You got to look at them numbers. You got to make those investments. You need some help, you know where to find me.
Hyacinth, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. You are a voice for our time. There's so much transition happening in this season for so many of the folks you're called to, particularly, you just spoke right into my soul today. And so I just want to say thank you. And thank you all for watching. And I pray that this conversation challenged you to look beyond the external decision, but get into the internal work that's required to cross over. Crossing over requires wisdom, it requires a strategy, it requires faith. But crossing over is alignment with your identity and your assignment. It's about becoming whole. It's becoming healed and courageous enough to walk into the life that God has predestined for you. And so tonight I encourage that person who knows that God is calling you forward, but you're afraid of what obedience may cost. You heard Hyacinth on tonight, okay? Trust the one who is leading you is also able to sustain you. Until next time, train, transform, transition. And remember, triumph is God's promise to you in every season. Good night.
Amen.